once again. A very good evening. And hope you're all well. The topic for this evening is upping your game. So I took part in an online retreat that was held around the world for the fellas who study Raj Yoga. And I thought it was a very good topic because certainly the year, as you'll agree, has provided a lot of challenges, and it's really called for us in terms of our internal responses and in terms of our spiritual responses. It's called for us to up our game. And so we'll look at that tonight. We'll explore what does that mean. Someone sent me a message yesterday which I quite liked, and it was about a conversation, an apparent conversation that took place between God and the Archangel Michael. And it seems there's been a typographical error for the year. There was an email sent saying the schedule of 2020's schedule of events. So God said to the Archangel Michael, have you scheduled all the events for the decade? And the response was, the decade? And he says, yes, the 2020s. It's a decade. Really? I thought you meant to schedule the events. These were 2020's events. So that was the misunderstanding. If it feels like you're experiencing a decade worth of life in the space of a year, that might be the case. I certainly felt a bit of humour in that. So upping your game, as the title suggests, life is a game. It's not whether you win or lose, but how you play the game. And it's a given, in the world that we live in. It is a world of opposites. And sometimes we're led to believe that we always need to know how to be on top. And otherwise we should look upon the way that we go about things as, that there's either success or failure. Perhaps a more spiritual approach is to understand that the seesaw of life is always going to swing one way and back the other. And so it is going to be the case that there are times when we experience success. And can we do that without losing our head? So that's to appreciate the effort we put in, to enjoy the fruit of that success, but not to get too caught up on it. Because it's good to appreciate that whatever takes place in life, there is a law that dictates that it will emerge, it will persist for some time, and then it will decline. And, this is something that could play out over the course of 5 minutes. It's something that could play out over the course of a generation. But it is inevitable that the scenes of life will emerge. Given the right circumstances, they will emerge at their given time. They will persist for as long as the lifespan of that event is, and then they will decline. And so it's always good to know that no matter how wonderful something is, not to lose myself in it, because it will also fade away. So the seesaw, or the swing, we can say, swings the other way as well. And that's that we have to endure failures. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it seems to be the case that our failures will often teach us more than our successes. Because the prompt is, if something is not working as well as we'd hoped, or we haven't achieved the outcome that we were moving towards or hoping for, it's inviting us to step back, stand back, and just draw breath and say, okay, what was it that I did in the preparation? What was it I did in the lead up? What was it that I did that contributed to these events, that they happened in this way? So to reflect on life as a game, we have to stand back and sort of think, well, what's the purpose of a game? There is a very one-eyed view to say that games are only for winning. Certainly that's not the spiritual approach. A game is something to be enjoyed. And I do sometimes reflect on the idea of reaching the end of our path, the end of our life, and being able to look back and reflect for everything that I went through, for all the hardships and all the efforts and everything that I put my efforts into. Did I enjoy the journey that I'd taken? It would be a good question. Can you imagine that being put to you at the end of your days? Have you enjoyed it? And have I enjoyed it enough that I'd be prepared to go through it again? So I did mention this idea of the retreat that I'd taken part on, and there was a wonderful preparation kit that was distributed to the people taking part in the retreat. And I'll be sharing some of the insights, some of the takeaways, if you like, from the retreat and the preparation. And I found that there were a lot of very simple things that I could do that would up my game. Now, the way that I read that in terms of spiritual endeavor, sometimes we say effort, which seems a bit heavy. It seems like you've got to put a lot of hard work in if you're making effort. I'm not quite sure what the right word is, whether we say endeavor or effort, or maybe it might be as easy as input. And a lot of it was rather than trying to achieve a lot of really, really big things, just to concentrate on the little things. I do remember a quote, and it was from a book that was full of phrases from the tradition of the samurai. And one of them was to pay absolute attention to very, very small things. So to all the small things, we need to pay the very best attention. And then when it comes to the big things, how to deal with the big things? You deal with them absolutely lightly. And it makes a great deal of sense, because if we do look after the small things, what are the big things made of? They consist of lots and lots of little small things. So one of the small things was, rather than having to set aside a big room and a comfy chair and the candles and the incense and the right set of clothes and 45 minutes and music and lighting and everything, what it was to meditate, all I need to do is to sit down where I am and to set aside just a few minutes. And I think most of you have a phone. I was thinking, if you don't have a phone, you probably have a microwave. So what you could do is you could fill a cup with water and put it in the microwave, and you decide, the idea is that now is the time. Now is the time to meditate. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've set 2 minutes on my clock. And so I want you to reflect on, just for 2 minutes, a game that you enjoy. And I want you to go to the motivation of that game. And maybe I'll offer a few thoughts. So 2 minutes, we're off and running. So just sit comfortably. Always good to start with a deep breath. Bring you back to the present moment. And set aside all the reasons why now is not the perfect moment to meditate. It's as simple as coming back to myself. Breathing easy and drawing my attention very naturally back to the self. And on the screen of my mind, just remembering again, don't think too hard. A game that you played or took part in. Okay, 2 minutes. Perhaps you don't think 2 minutes is enough to make a difference. If we don't take the time to take the time, and if we don't create the mind space, there's not the opportunity to realize or to invite the kind of thoughts that might enter having created that space. So I think this is one of the traps, that I need half an hour to meditate. I even need 10 minutes to meditate. I'm too busy. I've got too many things to do. It really struck me that these people that I heard speaking over the course of the retreat, perhaps it's a measure of the way that the world has changed and the effect of the events outside, that all of a sudden meditation is something that is essential. And we don't have to wait until 7 o'clock in the evening, and we don't have to reserve it for the first thing in the morning. Just to create a small little window of opportunity, and just to say, okay, this is important, that right now I can come back to myself, I can park, or I can shelve whatever else is going on right now, and just create a little space where there's oxygen for the mind. If we're in a state of worry or anxiety, we can't imagine the thought that might come if we step into a space of peace. We can guess, but it's actually only in the doing. It's only in the process of stepping into that place of peace that the thought will reveal itself. So we've got to be in the game. We've got to be in the game. So life, why do we want to play the game of life? We've got to be in the game. We've got to participate to actually find out what the joy of the game is. And you'll know this for any game that you've played, whether it's a sport, whether it's a board game, whether it's just playing in the sense of, mucking around. And you see that with very young kids, very young children. They have such an innate sense of play, and nobody teaches them how to play. They just know. It's a very, very natural expression of spirit. And when we're playing a game, it reveals to us something about our nature, something about our capacity, something about our skills. And there's also that aspect of fun. But according to who we are, there will be a particular kind of game that that appeals to us. I'm thinking someone I worked with who was on the national fencing team, and he was a wonderful guy. He got a bit grumpy at work, but the times that I heard him talk about fencing, he absolutely lit up. And he started to lose himself. He just started to wax lyrical about the joys of fencing, all the qualities that he found in it. He was talking about so much about fencing not being about, trying to stab the other guy with the sword, but about the sportsmanship, about the nobility, about the focus, about the concentration, about the all the particular skills that he had honed, that he had discovered within himself, that he had brought out. One game that I played that I really enjoyed, even though I wasn't so good at it, was badminton. And it was interesting because the thing with badminton is it goes quick, quick, slow, and it goes from quick to slow very, very suddenly. So there's this factor of surprise and being unpredictable. And even when we don't necessarily play a game so well, we can draw a lot of joy from seeing others who are very skilled at that. And, I know the shuttlecock in the badminton, it can travel so quickly and then it can stop and almost like just float. And so if you reflect upon a particular game that you've played and think of yourself, you might have done so in that little meditation, it would reveal to you something about where you find your joy, perhaps even where you find purpose and particular skills that appeal to you. So the other thing is that when we play a game, one of the things that will encourage us to engage with the game longer and longer is that when we improve with it. And as we improve, we don't mind if the challenges come. Although it might be easy to play something at a very simple level, we can say an introductory level, after a while it gets quite boring because it's not drawing upon our skills. It's not actually asking us to better ourselves in terms of meeting what the game is asking of us. So that's one of the ways that perhaps we can reflect on what's happening at the time around us in this year, that it is drawing upon our internal skills, it's drawing upon our internal resources, and it's asking us to better ourselves, to step up. And I think coming from a spiritual perspective, we perhaps have a better understanding of the nature of the game. And certainly in the time that I've been studying with the Brahma Kumaris, I really feel that I've gained such a wonderful insight into how to really make the most of life and how to enjoy life. And this idea of playing the game of life. I think one of the misgivings that we might live with is that where there's a game, that competition is necessary. And sometimes, or often, it might be indoctrinated into us. You know, it's very much this competitive nature that can be in our culture. And the idea that can sit behind that is once again looking at life and I suppose seeing that where one person wins, in order for one person to win, it means that another person has to lose. And it's sometimes described as duality, that always dividing things up into two parts, and in this case, winners and losers. And so if I look out into the world and I'm someone who seeks the experience of success, which is another reason that we want to play a game. We want to have the experience of feeling that we've achieved, that there's been success. And we can say, yes, I was victorious, I won. If we take a competitive outlook, and we always take a competitive outlook, rather than concentrating on, in sporting terms, we can say our personal best, and rather than playing the game in the best way, I become distracted and I start to focus more on my opponent. And so my energy doesn't actually move towards bettering myself, but defeating someone else. And they're two very different motivations. I always took a lot of inspiration from the sports people that I saw out in the world who, regardless of the event that they are in, they would say the person that I'm racing against is myself. And I'm thinking of the Olympian Ian Thorpe, the swimmer, who was for a long time one of our best swimmers. Now, I do recall him saying that the one that he is racing against is himself. And that sense of achieving our personal best. So in spiritual terms, what does it mean to achieve my personal best? In the context of Raj Yoga, which is what we study, I think for me, part of achieving my personal best is always keeping my eye, always keeping my aim, my concentration on my sense of spirituality. So what that means is that as I go about my daily routine, you know, whether I'm working from home, whether I'm helping out in the centre, cooking in the kitchen, or whatever it might be, always, whatever activity that I'm caught up in, never to actually lose myself completely, always to come back and return back to the self, which is actually a very good prompt for another 2 minutes. Here's a bit of a game. So I'll do it again. I've got the clock on and I've got 2 minutes. So once again, let's start the clock running. And you'll be a little bit more relaxed this time. So it might be a little bit easier just to retreat from what's going on around you. And just to retrieve your attention from the external activity and to step inside. if you want to imagine the room behind your eyes, that internal space where I, the thinking, feeling being, resides. And having stepped inside to that realm of consciousness, thought and feeling, I want you to consider your spiritual motivation. It might be as easy as, why do you tune in on a Monday night? Or what do you like about the atmosphere of the BK Centre that keeps you connected with us? So just to hold that thought, that feeling, just for a little longer. So 2 minutes all of a sudden seems like not enough time to relax and step within. And I would challenge you, can you not find 2 minutes every hour? So something to take on board, something to play with, and see how you go. See if, rather than postponing till the end of the day, that you can have a few little breaks throughout the day. So taking a step back, returning to the topic of upping your game, sometimes in our study, what we do is referred to as the game of remembering and forgetting. So when we remember, it's interesting, one of the pieces of advice that comes up again and again in our study is to remember yourself, to be a soul, but also to remember the Supreme Soul. And I found it interesting, this topic of mindfulness is very, very popular. And someone suggested to me that in the original scriptural language of Buddhism, which is Pali, the word that's being referred to and has become known as mindfulness, translated as mindfulness from the Pali script, could also be translated, or was originally translated, as remember. So the game of remembering and forgetting. And it's interesting when I remember, when there's a deep sense of remembering who I am and who my connection is with, there's a lot of other things that come with that. When I remember my spiritual nature, the more that I meditate upon that, the more that I dwell upon that and think deeply, also the sense of a spiritual purpose emerges, it comes to the surface. A sense of spiritual meaning. So both were touched upon in the commentary that we had before. And so, and I know for me, within my own journey, this is something that really came to life. That through my teens and my 20s, I found life pretty difficult because I hadn't found that sense of purpose and meaning. And through my study of meditation and spirituality, this was something that really started to emerge and become a lot clearer. And so it's almost I tell myself, or I hear myself say, and now I remember. Now I remember. So you know, when there's that sense of, yep, I remember, I know what I'm here for, and I know what the game is that I have to play. And the more that we actually recall that, the more that we remember the purpose that the soul, this soul or the soul sitting there has to play, so many of the distractions fall aside. And it's interesting, we've been given this time to really be away from so many distractions. Some of them might be very comforting or our favorite distractions or what have you, but it's really invited us to think a lot more deeply. And perhaps it has been instrumental in evoking or promoting that sense of remembering. Now I know why, I can see the purpose. And so these things that are not so useful are forgotten. They're cast aside. But it can change very quickly. And perhaps this is something we might see in the next while, that when people have the opportunity to return to the lifestyle that they've known before and that they've taken comfort in, who knows, they might jump headlong into it. And so what happens when I forget? That's the other side of the coin. The game of remembering, forgetting. So at one point I remember and I have my purpose. And when I forget, I lose my purpose. So this sense of really not being sure, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? Perhaps being distracted because I'm looking at the other players. Perhaps just being distracted, being caught up in things that are really not aligned with the deeper purpose, the deeper game that I have to be playing. And I just get distracted from, what's the initial reason? What is the deep virtue or the deep value within me that that gives meaning to my life? And so when we forget ourselves, when we forget our spiritual nature, we become very caught up. The end result of forgetting ourselves is that we find an identity that's quite physical, quite limited. And as much as we try to bolster up and improve and, beautify and do everything we can to the physical identity, to expand it, to make it more important, to have a bigger impact in the world, and we can keep on going and going and going on a physical level, but we're never going to be able to solve or never to answer the fundamental spiritual question. And so in the game of remembering and forgetting, part of the spiritual condition or part of the human condition is that we do forget. And we need a connection, a personal connection with the one who never forgets, the one who is always in that state of self-awareness. And that's, of course, the Supreme Soul. I was reminded in the course of the retreat I was telling you about of a very simple practice of remembering I, the soul, as a point of light, and also remembering the Supreme Soul as a point of light. And what struck me was that you might have heard that if we take the human body and if it's compressed down to its most essential, what they can do these days, I've heard it said that they can compress, when someone dies, they can take their ashes and they can compress them and they can turn what the remainder of the ashes, the body is, down to a diamond. And I thought perhaps it's the same with the soul. For all the parts that we play, our personality, everything that's so expansive, if we return who we are and all the layers, all the roles that we play, and reduce that right down to the absolute essence, we just get this spark of pure consciousness. And that's who I really am. You know, that's the spark that is the soul that illuminates the body. So this game of remembering and forgetting and coming back to the essential self. And when I'm in that consciousness, sitting in the awareness of a soul, and then casting my thoughts, sending a thread of thought to the Supreme Soul, the one who's also in that state of absolute essence and absolute purity. And this connection of minds, this connection through this thread of thought, it empowers us. It awakens us and it ignites the soul in that state of remembrance. So when we return to that state, we're living in such a state that at every moment, you know, this amnesia that we suffer from moment to moment. Why am I doing this? What am I supposed to be doing now? I'm in the moment and I'm enjoying every moment being absolutely present. And so our quality of life changes when we bring that kind of attention, that kind of focus. And I think we can extract so much more experience, so much more quality, and then there's so much more to appreciate. And subsequently, you know, when we lead a spiritual life, what tends to happen is that life becomes simpler and simpler because we're learning to appreciate things at a very, very simple level. And so we don't need so much. And so sometimes in a game we think, well, I don't have the cord, I don't have the clothes, I don't have the right racket, I don't have this and that and that. Don't have all the extra things we need to be a good player. So we think, no, it's all too much. Very, very simple to be a good player in the game of life. Coming back every now and then, just back to the essential self. So I think that's another good prompt. And this time, let's have a little bit longer. We might even go for 4 minutes. What do you think? So you've got a phone. You can try this at home throughout the day, throughout the week. Or as I said, if you don't even have a phone, you can put a cup of water in the microwave for 4 minutes. So sitting comfortably and relaxed. And coming back to myself. Let me breathe easy. Let me feel my limbs just start to become relaxed and fall away. If there's anything happening outside, or even outside of me in the room, let me acknowledge that and be okay with it. So my body is at ease. And I step within. Step inside. And just imagine that tiny, tiny spark of consciousness. Imagine a star on the screen of your mind. It's almost the simplest form that you can imagine. Just a tiny point. Pure conscious energy. But the creator of thought and feeling. Radiating and receiving. And when I connect with the Supreme Soul, that the one with whom I have an eternal relationship, who even when I forget myself, will come and remind me. So it's interesting, isn't it? The depth we can go to in 4 minutes. So one of the interesting aspects of playing a game is often when someone wants to move up through the ranks of playing a game, it's only through the vision of someone else that they can achieve what they're capable of. So the player of the game might be very, very talented, but it's someone who has an understanding, a better understanding of how those talents can be used, who can help that player, achieve the highest goal within that particular field. So one is to be the player, but then you need the coach. So certainly it's a big step forward to recognize our own virtues, our own talents, but it will always be limited if it comes back to my choice in how I'm going to use that. If I really want to up my game, if I really want to make the most of my internal resources, I need to have the humility, I need to have the faith as well, to invite the presence of the Supreme Soul and to call upon the guidance of that one. And in doing so, in the same way that a coach can train and shape and hone the skills of a particular player to ensure that they achieve their very best. In the same way, when I invite the company, and for me it very much comes down to having that experience of a companion, creating that space and just inviting the presence of the Supreme Soul. And you've seen how we can create a space for 2 minutes, for 2 minutes, for 4 minutes. And with that purity of intention and with that commitment to quality of peace, that's the space. That's the space that will invoke the Supreme Soul. And sometimes, or often I should say, it can be amazing what the outcomes are when we let go of our own limited thinking in what's possible. And not just in tasks, but also in terms of who we can be, our personal best. And as we heard recently in one of our classes, there's a very strong connection between faith and courage. There's a courage that's needed to actually take that step of faith. But creating that space and that initiative, it's a step forward to invoke the company of the Supreme Soul. And there's protection, there's safety in doing so. And I think also, if we reflect that we're living in such a time when we can make a wonderful, wonderful difference through our peaceful presence, through our heartfelt good wishes, through the very, very best of intentions for all of those around us. If we call upon the guidance of the Supreme Soul and make ourselves available to make that difference, it's something that I'm sure we'd look back upon and think, is that a game that I'd like to play again? Absolutely. So I'm looking at the clock, and as with all games, there comes a time when the game is up. I think the game's just about up. So I'll call out to the voice in the ether, which is Jackie in the other room.
Thanks, Tip. Taking us into those moments of silence, actually, or leading us into that space, which is the seat of the soul, which is the seat of peace. It left such a peaceful feeling. I don't know whether there'll be any questions, but we'll invite questions. And in the meantime, I just wonder if you could enlarge a bit on the eternal relationship between the soul and the Supreme Soul, the eternal relationship aspect.
It's interesting if you reflect on the idea of the soul traveling over the course of many, many lifetimes. Certainly in the belief that I was brought up with, there was not the idea of reincarnation. But I just had a sense that how could it be that eternity is such an expanse, such a huge stretch of time, and here I am, I come down and I have one go at it for 60, 70, 80, 90 years, whatever it might be. So my own feeling was that idea didn't fit for me. So within the teachings of the Brahma Kumaris, when the idea came that, the soul has traveled throughout time for a much, much broader length of time. And over the course of that time that we've played many different parts, we'd worn many different human costumes. And so in each of those lifetimes, there would be a different family, a different mother, a different father, different siblings. As you grow up, you would take a different partner. And, you know, your own family would come, this kind of thing. And then within the next life, there'd be a change of costume, so you're not sure who's playing which parts. But one thing that's quite wonderful to reflect upon is throughout the many lifetimes that we've been searching for God, because that one doesn't change in terms of a costume. We've always been seeking the same one. We've always been seeking the same one. And that one knows us beyond any of the different costumes that we've worn. So knows the essence of the spirit and knows the qualities of the soul. So I feel this is a very special time. This is a very magic time where so much, whether you say hidden or secret knowledge, we have access to this awareness of, you know, what it is to be a soul, and a very deep understanding, very deep knowledge of who the Supreme Soul is. So it's really a time to awaken that relationship. And it does make sense to me as well that if God is remembered historically and throughout the course of devotion in all these different religions, there must be a point in time when the soul has an encounter with the Supreme Soul. So I think, you know, that's something for me that makes an enormous amount of sense, that every human being does have to encounter or connect with God. It's up to us, the amount of energy that we put into that connection and how deeply we explore it. And of course, the more energy and the more interest we put into that exploration, that relationship, the stronger the connection. I think the more we'll come to understand the beauty of who that soul is. And the other thing that's absolutely wonderful is, I suppose, the reflection that we get back, the vision, the way that that one looks upon us. Because, you know, the vision of God is not limited, you know, to any of the human limitations. So there's something much deeper and much more beautiful in terms of what the Supreme Soul sees in us.
I was thinking too, what do you think, Tim, about the connection with the Supreme Soul, awakening in us the absolute qualities of the soul. When we start to think of ourselves as a soul,
Yes.
then we learn that the qualities of, you know, peacefulness and love and happiness is natural, and these are the essential, unique qualities of the Supreme Soul, which get to be awakened in us as well.
Mm.
So, and I was remembering a story about a group of Brahmins going to play in the park, and there was some children there, or one child was there, and the child had one of those big beach balls, and so, you know, the adults started throwing the ball back to one another and having a great time passing this ball around, and the child started chasing after the ball, saying, my ball, my ball, my ball, my ball, and eventually got the ball, but the game finished.
Mm.
And I was remembering how you said, like, you know, the spiritual sharing or the radiating of the spiritual qualities that happens when you follow this lifestyle a bit seriously. So,
but yeah, it's very much Yeah, we can see that. The moment we start to become possessive, the moment we say mine, it limits what we can share. And yeah, I can certainly see that being played out in the world, rather than having the opportunity to share, our spiritual resources, but also, the resources of the world around us. The moment we get caught up in mine, it's like the game finishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's quite helpful, this what we call the spiritual powers that we also get taught.
Mm.
Soul teachers to handle those situations.
Mm. One point that really came up for me, as I was talking about the retreat and the preparation. We always admire when we see someone who's very skilled at a particular game. And one of the skills that we like to see people responding very, very quickly. And I've been reminded, in the same way that we can, make a commitment to, have those 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, a few times throughout the day. I was reminded that in terms of responding to situations, when we have the presence of mind to respond to them as soon as is reasonable, and it might be, okay, how quickly am I going to set aside some criticism that I received? How quickly am I going to set aside some negativity that has come up in me? And the idea is to respond as quickly as possible. How quickly am I going to set aside a doubt? And just in the same way that a skilled player will respond very, very quickly, they read the situation and they straight away. It's something that I think saves a lot of energy. It saves a lot of energy. And it enables us to move on very, very quickly. And you think the contrast is to harbour a doubt for 5 minutes, for 15 minutes, for a week, or for longer. How much energy have I lost? So this is another thing that from the retreat that I'm really taking away in terms of upping my game. How quickly to respond to situations so that I can move on, and so I can save myself from losing a lot of energy and negativity, or things that just are fruitless.
Yeah, I think that was certainly my experience when you gave us those few minutes of reflection. The accumulation of that was a lovely feeling of peace, and I would know that if you did that regularly, when it came to a situation that was challenging, you'd be able to think more quickly on your feet.
Mm.
And it's like you started out with, put in small things, and you'll automatically gain the larger things.
Yeah.
And there is the way with savings, isn't it?
Yeah.
Save your pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. So
It's like that, yeah.
I think that was very nice. Okay, we have some appreciation. Very nice class tonight. Great. We don't have any questions coming up in the chat box. If there isn't anything out there that you would like expanded upon, we could maintain this very nice feeling of peacefulness and togetherness if Tim leads us in a reflection to close. You all happy with that? Aha.
Do you have a question?
So there aren't any questions, Tim.
Okay.
You've taken everyone into that peaceful place.
Okay. So maybe just for a few more minutes. So once again, breathing deeply. I'm just doing so quite consciously. So we breathe in and out however many hundreds or however many thousand times over the course of a day. It's a very simple way to bring my attention back to the moment. It's something that I do unconsciously. I bring my intention and perhaps also a level of appreciation. So breathing deeper and just relaxing. And just talking to yourself. I let my body sit at rest. And when the body's at ease, it's much easier to step within. And just finding that space within. That inner space. And perhaps imagining on the screen of your mind a very tranquil, quiet, clear pond of water. The more that I return to my original awareness, any ripples on the pond start to still themselves. And as the ripples become calm, I can see more deeply. I can look into the depths of that well of my being. And just by being still, inviting the presence of the Supreme Soul. Sometimes called in Hindi Sundaram. beautiful one. So creating that very pure intention, a very peaceful intention. Also invokes the company of the Supreme Soul, whose energy and presence helps restore me back to my original peace. Om Shanti.